Before we get started, I'd like to recognize and acknowledge the Songhees and Esquimalt nations on whose traditional territories we live, we learn, and we do our work. And I just want to express my personal gratitude to all of you for being here together tonight to talk about budget and what we can do to best serve our students in the next school year. So a quick overview of the agenda. We will have a welcome, some opening remarks, budget presentation, and then most importantly, the table talk, and then following with some closing remarks. And just to let you know, the purpose of the meeting this evening is to provide you with some context around the 23-24 budget, and to receive public feedback on budget topics and priorities. And it's also an opportunity for the public to have conversations with trustees and district staff. So I'd like to introduce you to Nicole Duncan. She is our board chair.
Hi, everybody. Welcome. I just want to say, thank you so much for being here, for taking your time this evening to apply yourselves and all your skills and experience, and hopefully great solutions to our budget this year. We find ourselves in not unfamiliar waters, but certainly difficult times in terms of a budget deficit and some competing priorities that will be very difficult for the board to balance. But I do have every confidence that we'll come up with some creative solutions. And I just ask that everybody here tonight really just take the time to hear from the folks around you and really come with an open mind and an open heart. And I know everyone's going to really prioritize our students and helping our students to achieve all the good things that we know they're capable of. So good luck this evening, and thank you again for your time.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Deb Whitten, and I'm the superintendent this evening. And as Katrina stated, I will be sharing some opening remarks. I do want to let you know my opening remarks, that sounds a bit short. So I have 19 slides, so not a lot, but not like opening remarks, like sentences. I do think it's important to ground our work and ground our conversation and aligning our work. So as I go through this evening, I'll share a little bit about our district strategic plan, as well as our FESL, what we commonly and fondly refer to as FESL, which is a framework for enhancing student learning. I do also want to echo Chair Duncan and Katrina's remarks about gratitude for you coming this evening, for you opening your hearts and minds to the possibilities in order to best support the students we have in the district. When we are looking at our budget, we're looking at it through the lens of the strategic plan and the FESL document. And we're hopeful that the information that will be shared this evening will help you assist us in suggesting options for the 2023-24 budget process. And as we look at aligning our work, it is important just to point out a few facts about our district. So we have 48 schools in our district, K through 12. We have about 19,750 students in our district. Within our departments, we have an Indigenous education department. We also within district team have early years, elementary supports, middle supports, secondary supports, which also have mental health and wellness, French immersion, pathways and partnerships, inclusive learning, facilities, IT for learning, human resources, financial services. And while that sounds like an incredibly big district, it is for 19,000 students. It also has a great deal of expertise and skill. And so I'm very fortunate to be able to work with fantastic staff throughout the district. As a leader, I recognize I also have privilege. I have privilege to be able to open and close the doors by how I walk through this world. I recognize and acknowledge this privilege, and I'm accountable to the learners in this district. In the graphic you see, there are students at the center, and this grounds our work and also acts as a reminder to ensure that we think of the students who we do not often hear from, and that we think of the parents that are not here this evening. I believe that everyone should feel seen and heard in their learning environment. They should feel a sense of belonging. They should feel connected to their learning, and they should feel safe. We know that when students feel safe, when they feel seen, when they feel heard, they are more likely to develop a strong sense of identity. They have a positive sense of self, and they engage in their learning and are more confident in taking risks. So we have 48 schools in our district with approximately 20,000 students. And in order to do this very important work, we must align our time, our energy, and our resources to support every learner in the district. And sorry. As the superintendent, I'm committed to the truth and reconciliation and the calls to action. The United Nations Declarations of Indigenous Peoples, the 2 local education agreements, our Métis Education Agreement and the Urban People's House Indigenous Advisory Terms of Reference, also commonly referred to as UPL. My commitment includes addressing the achievement gap that we have between Indigenous and non-Indigenous students. We must continue to commit to fostering a learning environment at all levels of the school system that establishes high expectations for Indigenous students and that maximizes their learning by helping them feel safe, feel seen, and feel heard. As a district, we must invest in literacy, numeracy, and a holistic view of the student learning experience, including what we know about First Peoples principles of learning and differentiated instruction. The district has 9 core values, and you'll see those in our strategic plan, those core values being engagement, equity, innovation, integrity, transparency, partnerships, respect, social responsibility, and sustainability. We also have a mission, and a vision. And our mission is that we nurture each student's learning environment and well-being in a safe, responsive, and inclusive learning community. And our vision is that that each student has an opportunity to fulfill their potential and pursue their aspirations. The 3 goals that you'll see in our strategic plan are listed on the slide, and hopefully you can read them from the back. No, they'll just say, I'll quickly read them out. Some can, some can't. No judgment. You can see the 3 main goals listed on the slide. To create an inclusive and culturally responsive learning environment that will support and improve all learners' personal and academic success. To create a culturally responsive learning environment that will support Indigenous learners' personal and academic success. And the 3rd goal is to create an inclusive and culturally responsive learning environment that will support all learners' physical and mental well-being. Our framework for enhancing student learning is a document that we complete every year, and this document helps us plan and report on expectations. It combines accountability with evidence-informed decision-making. And it's a system-wide continuous improvement to support equity of outcomes for all learners. What you'll see in the document, and it is located on our website if you want to go a little bit deeper, but you'll see district successes as well as district goals. So I know for a fact you can't read what's on the slide tonight there. So I'll just share a few areas of success. What we have invested time and finances into engaging with the learning community with a specific focus on assessment and reporting. This has helped in establishing a reporting subcommittee, adopting the use of proficiency scales in some elementary and middle schools, the development of a district electronic portfolio tool, the expansion of childcare studios on school sites to support ongoing need for childcare, as well as before and after school care. We also, as I mentioned, have 4 agreements with, two with local nations, Esquimalt and Salmese, one with, Métis, and one with Urban People's House. These represent the self-identified Indigenous students in the district. And we are currently working on an implementation plan for all of the agreements. There is also an Elders Advisory Committee that meets monthly to support Indigenous education. And lastly, we have opened a Welcome and Learning Center to support immigrant and refugee students new to Victoria. We have collaboration sessions with the Ministry of Children, Family and Development and Indigenous delegated agencies to better build connections to support children and youth in care. Our FESL has 5 educational outcomes, and I, in the interest of time, will whip through them. So we have first a literacy outcome, and you can see the focus areas listed on the slides. We have strategies attached to those educational outcomes. One is to have an intentional activation of our local education agreements, as well as the Métis education agreement and the UPA terms of reference. The activation of a digital or district literacy plan, and also continuing our focus on literacy for the district's professional development opportunities. The second educational outcome is regarding numeracy, and some strategies attached to those are similar to the literacy. So again, an intentional activation of the local education agreements, the Métis education agreement and the UPA TOR, as well as supporting ongoing district professional development in numeracy kindergarten through grade 12, and continuing to provide access to resources specific to numeracy. The third educational outcome is that students feel welcome, safe, and connected. And I've shared a little bit at the beginning of how important this is both for students to feel engaged and to feel safe and seen and heard, and a sense of belonging. This enables them to achieve to their fullest potential when they're comfortable in their buildings, when there's a sense of community, and when they have meaningful and positive adult interactions connected with their day-to-day learning. We also have the fourth educational outcome, and that is that students will graduate. And embedded in this educational outcome is a district team's goal, which is to support schools to feel confident and capable in re-engaging priority students so the students can say, I belong, I have purpose, and I matter. It's also to continue to invest in existing and new dual credit partnerships, and to continue to provide individualized student supports at the secondary level for priority students who are taking a dual credit course. And the fifth educational outcome is with regards to life and career core competencies. And you'll see the focus listed on the slide, and some examples to support this include continuing to invest in time for career center educators to co-create individual plans for students, families, and communities, and Indigenous education, inclusive education, and counseling teams, and also to co-create culturally responsive and inclusive experiential learning opportunities. Why I bring this to you this evening is as you're pondering the budget and where and what we should support as a priority, the work that we have in front of us is to support all learners, and the educational outcomes that I presented through FESL and through the district strategic plan are the priority of the district. Again, aligning our work, as you can imagine, with the district this size, we have many competing priorities, many important priorities. So when we're looking at aligning our work, when we engage, when we listen to the voices of the recipients of the service, and when we keep student learning at the center, we are better able to align our work, and we're better able to set up collaborative structures to support continuous improvement. As I mentioned previously, a primary focus for pre-kindergarten through to grade 12 is developing culturally responsive learning environments where all students are connected to their learning and feel seen, heard, and valued. Beyond the work I've shared this evening are other important items to help contribute to a safe, inclusive, and culturally responsive student learning experience. And you'll see some of them listed on this slide as well. So this evening, you'll have an opportunity during the table conversations to examine and provide your feedback on these areas and other areas that you think are important as well. I'd like to end with gratitude. As a leader, I acknowledge my privilege and I recognize that I'm very fortunate to be able to live, learn, play, and work on the traditional territories of the Esquimalt nations. I'm grateful that you have joined us this evening, and I look forward to hearing your thoughts and ideas on how best we can align our budget to the supports for students. And thank you again for coming.
Yeah. So I have the pleasure of providing a budget presentation. I have a lot of slides, but I'm going to try to keep it short so we can get to the good stuff. I always like to show this slide because the budget is a budget cycle and it's never ending, and we're either this year or next year or last year, but always the students are at the center of everything that we do. Budget scope, I just put this on here because we're required as a school district to budget for all of our funds, so operating, special purpose, and capital. But for the purpose of this meeting, we're just going to focus on the operating fund. And I'll also mention to you about budget responsibility. So as per legislation, our board is required to approve a balanced budget. We can use unspent budget from the prior years to balance. And just a reminder too that the board is a corporate body, so all of its rights and duties and powers reside with the full board and not with any individual trustees. And there is a budget advisory committee, but the committee is one that provides recommendations to the board, but it's the board's decision in the end to approve a balanced budget. We're just looking at enrollment. Enrollment drives our operating grant, and we're looking at a very slight decline in our enrollment for next year and further slight declines into 2 years after that. This just shows you what makes up our revenue. So you can see the majority of it is provincial grants that are driven by that enrollment. We also have some tuition from our international student program. And our continuing education. We have other revenue, rentals, leases, and investment income. On the expense side, we have all of our expenses broken into different categories, with the largest being instruction. And then we have district administration, operations and maintenance, and transportation and housing. And the slide here just shows you how our district lines up to the provincial average. So our instruction is just slightly higher. Our administration is slightly lower. Our operations is pretty close. And our transportation is lower because we're in an urban district. And I always like to remind people that when we're looking at our budget, which is over 200 million, that almost 92% of it is people. And the rest of it is supplies and services. I just bring this slide up because we have our operating budget, but there's also other things that we need to do outside of that. So operating capital reserves are monies that we set aside to either repair or refresh. In one case, childcare facilities. So we put some money aside so that we can do repairs and maintenance on buildings, and also for technology replacement. So that's educator laptops, PCs, and then student devices as well. So that's like the Chromebooks and the iPads that are in classrooms. Historically, we funded a certain amount for these items. In the past couple of years, that has dropped off as we faced budget deficits, but also we've received some federal funding from the government around COVID. When we started to look at where we're at with our technology, it's very outdated. Some of the technology we have are in our 7th year of life. So really coming to the end, which requires a bigger investment than what we normally would have. This just shows you the operating capital reserves around the student devices and educator laptops. So these are the requirements for the 2023-2024 budget year. And there is also a network infrastructure plan. We're currently in year 2 of a year 5 plan. And that is access points within schools, basically our Wi-Fi within our schools. And we hear that it's not great, but this work is has been ongoing, and in order to continue this work, there's another 618,000 that's required for 2023-2024. You've probably heard the terminology structural deficit. So what this is when your budgeted expenditures are greater than your budgeted revenues. So you don't have enough money to cover off your expenses. So often what happens is we use a prior year surplus to balance or one-time savings. We haven't completed our budget for next year yet. It's still in the works. But what we've done is we've taken the structural deficit from last year, which was 2.3 million. And then we've added back some of the one-time items that were approved, and then any of the known items. But really, this $4 million deficit that we're using is our best guess at this point. But we won't actually know what our structural deficit will be until we finish the budget. And we don't receive the funding announcement from the ministry until March 15th. And then there are other decisions that are kind of outstanding that the board is considering. So for example, custodial. So if the decision was made to add custodial, then that would add to the structural deficit. Just showing you here a history of our accumulated operating surplus. So if you go back to 2015, 2016, you can see we had a surplus of almost 22 million. And we've been working hard to get that down to make sure that we're spending our money on our current money on current students. So last year, our accumulated operating surplus was just over 8 million. And we had a contingency of 1.5 million. This is a projection of where we think we'll be at the end of the current year. So 8.2 last year, expecting to be at around 4 million this year. The missing pieces, 2.3 million that we had in surplus to help us balance for this year. We're not anticipating that we're going to have a surplus at the end of this year to help us balance next year's budget. The other item I'll mention too is that we currently have a contingency of about 1.2 million. And we're anticipating that that would remain and be there by the end of this year. There was 328,000 that we had in a reserve for international education. But due to lower enrollment in international, they've had to use that reserve in order to balance in the final budget. So as I mentioned, planned surplus to balance budget for 2023-2024 is currently estimated at 0. We did have lots of money that came in this year, but it was completely offset by expenses. I won't go through the details, but if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them afterwards. And as mentioned, our unrestricted operating surplus contingency is currently at 1.1, almost 1.2 million. And no international contingency. The district has a policy that's fairly new around operating surplus. It was a ministry directive in the last year. They're recommending that districts hold a reasonable, unrestricted operating surplus. And it's basically to mitigate any emergencies or things that would happen that might require the district not to be able to operate under its normal conditions. The recommendation is to hold a contingency of between 2% and 4%. And our current contingency is at 0.54% at 1.2 million. We have also a capital reserve. It's local capital reserve. And last year we were able to use 1.4 million of that reserve in order to fund capital asset purchases that would normally be paid using operating budget. And unfortunately, all of the funds in the local capital fund have been allocated. That sounds kind of depressing. I'd like to tell you everything is zero. But it's true, we're not in the best financial situation right now, and that's why it's so important that we're here today, because I think collectively we can work together to identify what the priorities are for the school district, and then also be able to work together to see how we can offset the deficit next year and have as little impact as possible on people. So this is a summary. Yeah, I'll leave it at that. And we'll move on to table talk as we have enough time here. So I'll just explain what table talk will be. So you have a couple of packages on your table. They have a black cover with tables on them. And in that package, there are 8 questions. And we'll basically allocate 10 minutes for each of the questions. And if you don't mind nominating, or someone could volunteer to be a note taker, we would love to be able to capture some of your discussion and be able to incorporate that into some feedback for the budget advisory committee and the board. I'll put the questions up on the screen, but you can also refer to the patch. I think there might be extras too if you would like to have an extra.